I feel like, the stories that you tell and the whole role of Mongabay and your mission is to connect people to why it matters, to really deeply embracing the love of the world greater than ourselves, and to really process why it matters and to feel a sense of urgency and a call to action. So what comes up for you around that?
Well, my writing for Mongabay was more focused on sort of the facts and the data. I would write pieces that were, reflective and personal, but that was a much smaller emphasis. And then as Mongabay has evolved and my role has evolved, I've kind of gone back to being able to write more of those reflective pieces, which also are often underpinned by data, but I've just found that people tend to remember the stories more than the figures. And so in this current environment we live in, a lot of people are not so sure about science or kind of the experts. And so they go off feeling. And so if you can bring those stories that are very relatable to people that are, again, underpinned by facts, you're more likely to engage certain audiences than who might otherwise do not.
Today, we enter one of Earth's most vital systems, the rainforest. It's a place that shows us how resilience works, how the smallest sparks of life gain meaning when they are woven into something larger, and how connection is what keeps the whole alive. I'm Jessica Morgenthau, and we're here exploring how nature's quiet brilliance can help us care more deeply for ourselves, for each other, and for the wild world we all share. This is Resilience Gone Wild, and we're headed into the rainforest. A flash of scarlet catches your eye as you step through the thick ground cover of the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador. A macaw bursts from the canopy above, wings bright red, blue, and gold. Its call sharp and wild. The air is warm and heavy. Damp leaves brush your arms. The ground is slick underfoot with roots and moss. A drop of water falls from high above and lands cool on your skin. Every breath tastes of wet earth and blossoms. Something rustles in the ferns waist high around you. You pause, heart beating faster, until a green iguana darts across your path and disappears into the shadows. A moment later, laughter-like calls erupt overhead. Squirrel monkeys leaping from branch to branch, their tails curling around vines. They chatter to one another in rapid bursts, as if teasing or passing along news about the stranger walking below. The forest moves in layers. In the branches above, a howler monkey begins its roar, deep and resonant, echoing for miles. Spider monkeys vault through the canopy, while a capuchin sits quietly, observing you with dark, curious eyes. Closer at hand, a morpho butterfly drifts by, its wings flashing metallic blue. At your feet, poison dart frogs, one yellow and another red with black markings. They're hopping between the leaves, calling with quick high notes that fold into the chorus of sound. The rainforest is alive with music. Insects drone like strings, frogs pulse like chimes, birds call in bright bursts, monkeys add their percussion, and rain patters on the leaves far above. The rhythm swells and quiets in waves. Then silence. A deep growl rolls through the understory. A jaguar, unseen yet present, a reminder of how many are watching from the shadows. Each step forward reveals more. Orchids bloom in impossible shapes, white and delicate, purple and speckled, orange like fire. Vanilla vines climb toward the light. Bromeliads hold pools of water where tadpoles wriggle. Leafcutter ants march with bits of green held high, carrying them underground to feed their fungal gardens that in turn feed the forest. A sloth hangs in slow motion, algae tinting its fur green. A harpy eagle glides above the canopy, its wings broad, its talons powerful enough to seize a monkey from the trees. The Napo River gleams through the trees ahead, wide and brown, carrying the forest in its current. Pink river dolphins rise and vanish again, exhaling with soft sighs. On the banks, a caiman floats still as driftwood, only its eyes above the water. Tapirs shovel along the shore, their snouts rooting for fruit. A herd of peccaries passes by, squealing as they dig for seeds, scattering when a shadow crosses overhead. As you walk deeper, the ground changes. Pools of water spread across the forest floor, and tiny silver fish flicker between the roots of trees. In these places, the river has risen and spilled into the understory. It feels as if you are moving through a forest that is also a lake. Orchids cling to branches, some opening in sudden bursts of color while others remain tightly furled, waiting for the right insect or the next rainfall. High above, fresh buds push from the branches that only days ago seemed bare. A flock of parakeets swoops in to feed on tender shoots, their green wings almost vanishing into the leaves. On another branch, a toucan carries twigs in his bill, weaving them into a hollow where his mate awaits, the beginnings of a nest. A tree beside the trail hums with life as stingless bees pour in and out, carrying pollen from new blossoms. The forest holds its youngest close. A capuchin cradles her tiny infant against her belly as she swings, pausing to let the baby cling more tightly before leaping to the next tree. Tamarins huddle together, older siblings helping to carry babies on their backs. You hear soft chirping near the ground and spot a cluster of river turtle hatchlings scrambling from the sand, their shells no bigger than your palm, racing toward the water while a watchful caiman stands guard nearby. You pause beneath a tree with long pods sprouting straight from its trunk, their skins painted in yellows, reds, and purples. One has split open, revealing pale pulp around bitter seeds. It's cacao, the beginning of chocolate. A little bat flits close, its fur dusted with pollen, reminding you that even this tree depends on unseen visitors of the night. Farther along, the sharp scent of cinnamon drifts from a tree where the bark peels in curling strips. In the dappled light, a coffee bush holds clusters of berries, ripening red. Overhead, a peach palm sways, its heavy orange fruits drawing a rowdy crowd of toucans. They tear into the flesh with loud squawks, while a capuchin sneaks in, grabs one, and bounds off, dropping pieces that scatter onto the forest floor where beetles and ants rush to claim them. An agouti darts from the shadows, seizes a Brazil nut, and disappears into the leaves. You know that hours or days from now, the nut will either be unearthed and eaten or left to sink roots into the soil. You can't tell which, and the mystery is part of the magic. The ground itself feels alive. The soil is soft, spongy with decay, and every step sinking slightly as if something is moving beneath you. You kneel and brush back the leaves to find threads of white fungus weaving through the litter, a quiet web that feeds on what has fallen and nourishes what still stands. It is the forest's hidden heartbeat, pulsing underfoot. Along the riverbank, you come upon a village where smoke curls from a cooking fire. A woman greets you warmly and presses a roasted plantain into your hand. As you sit beside the fire, you remember another day with her when she showed you the forest's remedies, how one broadleaf eases fever, how another crushed between your palms dulls pain. Today she talks of reading the forest in other ways, when the rain will shift, where fish run strongest when the river swells. Her knowledge feels as layered and alive as the forest itself, passed from generation to generation. You begin to notice that signs of death and decay are all around you. A giant tree has toppled, its roots pulled skyward in a massive wall of soil. Sunlight floods the clearing, dazzling after the dim understory. Green shoots already crowd the space, reaching upward as though they had been waiting for this exact chance. On the fallen trunk, orange fungi fan outward in tiers, where beetles scurry in frantic lines, and termites work silently inside, breaking wood back into soil. Everywhere you turn, the cycles reveal themselves. Fruits ripen and drop with heavy thuds, splitting open on the ground. Parrots shriek as they feast, scattering seeds across the forest floor. Bright blossoms fall onto puddles, drifting away like petals in a river. In the air above, a pair of harpy eagles circles, one returning to the nest where its chicks wait, feathers still soft and downy. As you take it all in, the ants tending gardens, the monkeys scattering seeds, the fungi knitting threads beneath your feet, the woman sharing her fire, you begin to see a deeper truth. The rainforest endures because everything here is connected. You remember the things you've read and heard about rainforests shaping weather far beyond their borders, about oceans regulating climate, about how biodiversity, clean water, and breathable air are not luxuries, but lifelines. Here, surrounded by the pulse of the forest, those truths feel different. They aren't facts on a page. They are living, breathing reality. Rain begins again, steady and soaking. It runs down your hair, drips from your sleeves, and fills your shoes. You slip once on the muddy trail, catch yourself on a root, and laugh at the mess. Overhead, squirrel monkeys erupt in chatter as if laughing with you. And then standing there, wet and alive in the heart of the Amazon, you feel your senses open wide. Your lungs fill with air rich with growth. Your ears take in the layered chorus. Your skin hums with the touch of rain and heat. Your eyes dart from flash to flash of movement and color. Your whole body feels awake, alert, joyful. In this place, the forest doesn't just surround you, it enters you. It sharpens your presence, tunes you to its rhythms, and fills you with a vitality that lingers long after you leave. The rainforest teaches us that resilience is built through connection. Every spark of life you notice, a flash of wings, a frog's call, a pod splitting open, matters on its own, and it becomes even more powerful when you see how it belongs to something larger. Leafcutter ants don't just carry leaves. They feed underground fungi that in turn nourish the forest. Monkeys aren't just filling their bellies with fruit. They are scattering seeds that grow into future trees. Fungi everywhere thread invisibly beneath your feet, passing nutrients between giants and saplings. These patterns are not accidents. They are the result of long adaptation and evolution. We humans, too, are really just one more species in Earth's systems, part of the balance, yet with a unique capacity to reshape systems intentionally for our own benefit, allowing us to lose track of our responsibility for keeping the balance. And most modern humans have. For thousands of years, rainforest communities have lived within these systems by taking only what they need and giving back through care and restraint because they understood how they were interwoven. They read the forest closely, which plants heal, which seasons bring change, what life each river carries, and they passed this wisdom forward so the balance could hold. Their example reminds us that connection brings responsibility. Resilience grows when we act as a positive part of the system, not as above it. The same truth applies to us today. When we shift our perspective from me to part of something bigger, our bodies and minds respond. Neuroscience shows that stress hormones like cortisol fall, while oxytocin and dopamine, the chemicals of trust, joy, and connection, rise. Our brains literally rewire toward calm and creativity. Our hearts beat steadier. Our breath deepens. Our muscles soften. Even our immune systems shift toward healing. The body knows we are safer, stronger, and more resilient when we live connected. And the change ripples outward. When your nervous system is calmer, those around you feel it. Families, friendships, teams, and communities all respond. The energy of connection spreads, lowering stress, raising trust, and making space for care. One shift in perspective can change the dynamic of an entire system. Just as one monkey spreads seeds that grow into a forest, one person's shift towards connection can ripple resilience far beyond themselves. This is the resilience lesson of the rainforest. Your sparks matter most when you recognize the systems they belong to. That recognition strengthens you, strengthens those around you, and strengthens the living systems we all share. It is also the thread that shaped Rhett Ayers Butler. His spark began with frogs and the gaze of a wild orangutan. Those encounters grew powerful because he recognized they were part of larger systems. Forests, species, people, stories. He carried them forward, supported by mentors and communities, until they became Mongabay, a global way of sharing the truth that everything is connected and every story matters. So as we turn now to Rhett's voice, carry this lesson with you. Seeing your moments as part of something larger is how sparks become resilience in your own body, in your relationships, and in the world we all depend on. Yay! I'm so thrilled to introduce Rhett Ayers Butler. And honestly, you have been a mentor and hero of mine for so long. And how you were popping up on my Google feed with like all these articles from Mongabay that I had no idea what Mongabay even was. And all of a sudden, like this all came together in my world. And I am so thrilled to be here with you and to tell you that you've been just an incredibly beautiful influence on my falling in love with nature and falling in love with like deep moments of curiosity and love and connection to why it matters. So thank you for being here and tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I guess I can get started at the beginning. My interest in nature began very young. So I've always loved being outside, and wildlife, but especially reptiles and amphibians. And so growing up, I was always, searching the local creek and the yard for salamanders and frogs and lizards. And so, I had the great fortune of having a mother who's a travel agent and a father who traveled a lot for business. So I had opportunities that most people don't have at a young age. And so my family prioritized travel. And because I had this special interest in reptiles and amphibians, I would want to go to the rainforest because the rainforest had the greatest diversity of species. And thankfully, I eventually got an opportunity to do that. So the first time I spent in kind of a real rainforest was when I was 12, went to the Ecuadorian Amazon. And so we stayed in a fairly traditional indigenous community that was right near Yosemite National Park, which is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. I had an amazing time there going out with the kids who were my age in the village and looking for frogs and things of that nature. I came back, and a few months later in the San Francisco Chronicle, there was an article about an oil spill that had happened on the Rio Napo upper where I visited. And so what that meant is that whole area was affected by this oil slick. And so I wondered what had happened to my friends in the forest and the animals. And so that's what moved me from someone who was into cool frogs to tracking environmental issues in the news. The thing that actually led me to take action happened a little bit later when I was in high school. I had the opportunity to go to Borneo, so specifically Malaysian Borneo, and visited a beautiful forest. And again, this forest is full of amazing frogs and lizards, but also had really interesting insects. And I had a really magical experience with a wild orangutan, which passed over my head and looked at me. It was special for me. He probably didn't care, but
Oh, I don't know. We should underestimate. That's the whole point, right? They're ridiculously intelligent, right?
Yeah, definitely. So anyway, I had that moment and I kept in correspondence with a scientist there. And I learned that forest is going to be pulped to make paper. And today that area is an oil palm plantation. But so once I learned that, I decided to want to raise awareness about tropical forests, what's happening to them and why they're important and why we should care. And so when I began college, I started working on a book about tropical forests. So my major had nothing to do with that. I just worked out on the side. And thankfully, I had an economics professor who got really excited about this project and gave me some independent study credit. And then I had credit from high school. So I was able to finish university a year early. And I spent that year finishing the book. Found a publisher, went through peer reviews. Publisher came back and said, we're interested in publishing this, but we're not going to put the money in to have nice color photos. So this is effectively going to be like a textbook. And so to me, that defeated the purpose of what I was trying to do, which is convey the beauty of rainforests and why I should save them. So I thought, well, I didn't write this book for money. I wrote it for impact. And so I decided to put the text online and create a website. And so I created the website. I called it Mongabay, which is named after an island off Madagascar, which is another very special place for me. But I didn't think I was going to run a website for a living. So I put the site up and then got a real job in Silicon Valley and was doing that. But over time, the site grew popular. And then in mid-2003, I put ads on the site. And because it was popular, it started generating revenue. And so within about 6 months, it was equal to about half my take-home pay. So I decided to quit my job and pursue my passion. And so that was the origin of Mongabay.
It's incredibly inspiring to me. I mean, I think about the fact that you got a real job and you were a finance and business major, right? And you had this economics professor. Like, there's so many layers to important points that I feel like that I'd love to talk about. You've had this mentor who understood both the business side. I mean, I think that there's an underlying business side to any environmental work that we do that needs to be part of the story. Like if we just talk about how much we love, how much the experience of the orangutan who connected with you, it doesn't translate for people to take action. So, to go to the place about how do we get people to take action based on the stories that they get from sources like Mongabay, about the stories that we're not in touch with and we don't know how to act on more than just a story that is a happy moment or a sad moment, right? The being raised with the openness and the curiosity that is supported by your parents, with the access to travel, but you can go into your backyard stream like you were and see that polluted, right? Like it happened that you found the article that connected to this exotic place that you'd been. But the reality is that we have that kind of stuff happening around the corner from us, in our backyards, that can get people to feel a sense of action as well.
I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of, going out and just appreciating the moment and going for the depth. I mean, one of my favorite things about the rainforest is you can go up to a tree and just sort of stare at it. And then you become aware that, okay, well, there's like a praying mantis and this is its tree. And the tree next to it has another praying mantis, and it's that tree. And over here, there's a gecko that's camouflaged in the bark. And if you look really closely, there's these little tiny plant hoppers that are iridescent colors that you probably wouldn't notice if you're just walking by. And so there's just like so much you can kind of unpack by just giving some time to it and just observing. So again, that's something that's also great about coral reefs as well. There's just like so much going on. You can kind of float over and say, oh, there are lots of fish and it's beautiful. But then if you like stop and just look at a coral head, there's so much more there.
I feel like, the stories that you tell and the whole role of Mongabay and your mission is to connect people to why it matters, to really deeply embracing the love of the world greater than ourselves, and to really process why it matters and to feel a sense of urgency and a call to action. So what comes up for you around that?
Well, and my writing for Mongabay was more focused on sort of the facts and the data. I mean, I would write pieces that were, reflective and personal, but that was a much smaller emphasis. And then as Mongabay has evolved and my role has evolved, I've kind of gone back to being able to write more of those reflective pieces, which also are often underpinned by data, but I've just found that people tend to remember the stories more than the figures. And so in this current environment we live in, a lot of people, are not so sure about science or kind of the experts. And so they go off feeling. And so if you can like bring those stories that are very relatable to people that are again underpinned by facts, you're more likely to engage certain audiences than who might otherwise tune out. Not every experience needs to be transformative or amazing. I mean, and so one of these was from a few years ago. One of our contributors in Gabon, which is part of the Congo Basin, met this community that had been managing this forest for, their entire history, basically for generations. And a concession had just been granted to a foreign logging company to come in and log that forest. And so it's going to have this major impact on this community. And so this journalist did this reporting on it. And the reporting got a lot of interest, and it captured the attention of the environment minister of the country, who then went to visit the site. And he just planned to be there for a few hours, but ended up staying overnight and really getting to know this community. And so then he went back, and eventually that permit was revoked, and that community's traditional customary rights was recognized. And so that was important because it was the first time in Gabon where there kind of been bottom-up conservation. Most of the conservation action in Gabon had been very top-down, which, can often alienate people and create enemies. So it was a historic moment that was something directly resulted from this reporting.
How does journalism like Mongabay support? It seems like to get the message out, otherwise it stays very small and very invisible. So it feels like that's a big part of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's elevating those stories and making people aware of them because, I mean, oftentimes there's very little knowledge of what's happening, and also just the traditional knowledge of these groups. I mean, they've been in these forests for a long time with these other ecosystems, maintaining them, understand how processes work. So there's a lot to learn. And so journalism has a role of elevating those stories, talking about why these places are important, and also like what the groups are. So, there's almost like a level of due diligence that, I mean, what the journalism has to do, but then, if you're, and if you're a philanthropist, these stories emerge. You can say, well, I want to do something for forests, and here are, some groups that are doing good work. Journalism can also, it really depends on the circumstances, but elevating these stories can also, in some cases, confer some level of protection to sources. So putting them on the map. It can also do the opposite. So it just really depends on the circumstances. Building up someone's profile can confer protection in certain circumstances, and so that is important as well. And then also, there's a connection aspect. So we did this long-running reporting project in Indonesia, which looked at community forest management. And we found that we would do a profile on a project or a community, and then other communities would reach out to us or that community directly to learn from that and try to replicate what they were doing. And so it had this effect, this sort of scalability effect that was very positive as well.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you're sharing best practices and you're giving optimism that these changes can happen and these moves can happen. You, I imagine, have so many interactions with small moments of different species, whether it be plant or animal. I think most of your focus is on animal, but I'm not sure. Can you share a few stories of what sort of magic you've had aha moments about, of resilience that you've seen, and whatever that means to you?
Yeah, so I had an experience recently in Mexico on these islands that are quite far off the Pacific coast, pretty remote, and with manta rays. And so I've gone diving and snorkeling with manta rays before. And I mean, I like manta rays, but I hadn't really, people had talked about this spiritual experience with manta rays, and I didn't quite get it, other than them being impressive animals. But here we went diving and there was just a lot of manta rays. And what I found really interesting was here, maybe this happens everywhere, I just hadn't had the experience before, but the manta rays would actually come up to each person in the group and make eye contact, and for, like, extended eye contact. And then they would manta rays would sometimes pair off and become your friend. Like they would follow you around for a whole dive. Just one. I mean, not, so it was like they would specifically engage with you. They would go around the circle, engage with each person. And then sometimes they would pair off with somebody. And I don't know why that happened, but it sort of like sparked this whole idea of, what's kind of going through this creature's brain. I mean, so they have the largest brain of any fish. But it just was something I never really thought about before until that moment happened. And so, all that knowledge that's contained within that animal, and if that's transferred throughout the community and like what it means for the ecosystem, like I have no idea, but it just spurred a bunch of questions that weren't there before. And so that also gets into sort of like a broader concept that I've been thinking more about, I guess, the past year. There was a paper that came out, it was last year, about the wisdom of elders in communities. And so obviously, like in human societies, this, but it's so different with animal communities. And so the resilience in those communities, like in an elephant community, is often those matriarchs that carry that knowledge over. And so when those animals are lost, it really reduces the resilience of that community and that species. And so it's something to think about. And same with like coral reefs. I mean, like, the coral they're ancient. So thinking about like the role that those really old animals have in that community. So it's not just knowledge, it's also the structural foundation for everything that's built on top of it. And so thinking about conservation not only as species or number of individuals, but also the specific individuals that are especially important for carrying that knowledge. Yeah, I think it just kind of plays into this broader idea of animal sentience, where they're and Jane Goodall is like a big advocate of this. Just like animals are individuals as well, and so they carry their own knowledge and experiences, and then collectively that creates almost like, a culture within an animal community. And so, I especially like having kind of a small window sometimes into these communities. And so, yeah, I guess I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this, but I think it just, strengthens that idea that, that animals are extremely intelligent and they have a lot to offer. And I always find it amazing where people think that, oh, this animal can't feel pain, or this animal has no feelings, or like, why would you think that? I mean, it makes no sense to me. And so I always struggle with people who sort of like continuously denigrate the mental capabilities of animals, or, that they can't be individuals.
And that they can't be part of a community and matter. So if you extract a member of a community, whether it's the elk or the elephant, which has that decades and decades of wisdom that is imparted across the community. I mean, it's the loss of an individual that is brushed aside, and the loss of the impact of that individual on the community that is completely ignored. I mentioned this in another podcast at some point, but I'm not a big meditator, but there's a meditative practice that I have held on to that just really jives with what we're talking about here, which is a soundscape process where if you stop and you pick one sense, I'll pick out the wind and I'll pick out, and shut out the other things, pick out the wind, pick out the birds, pick out the human voices, pick out, so that I'm just narrowing myself to that single moment, which takes time and focus and is so rewarding to really explore your curiosity and your empathy and your creativity and thought when you get down to that level. So I'm just picturing you're seeing the praying mantis, and that's their tree. And what's coming up for you on this? Is that something you ever do, or?
There's just so much to unpack when you're in a natural ecosystem of systems that are working all around you. You have no idea what they are or how they work, but when you get a peek into it, it's just very interesting for me. You mentioned the soundscape, which ties into another thing that I've been interested in, which is basically research that studies the soundscape through bioacoustic devices. And so how much you can learn about an ecosystem just by listening, which I think is really fascinating. It also gets you some scalability because, if you have a camera trap, it's vision based. And so it's whatever passes from that camera trap you get. But I mean, the reality is that that's only a small subsection of animals. Whereas if you look at the soundscape, you get birds, you get insects, you get frogs, you get mammals, other creatures. So, and you can see the patterns over the course of a day, but over seasons, over time, and you can start to really see these trends you wouldn't otherwise get just by, usually using visual data.
Yeah, that reminds me of a current story that's happening. I don't know if you guys are covering it or not. There's a million stories, so maybe not, about, I think it's the blue whales that have kind of gone silent. And it's not just what the moment in time of the soundscape is, but the changes in the soundscape for what's the story about the biodiversity health behind it. Do you want to share anything about that? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, the oceans, it's happening in ecosystems all over the world. But, one of the general trends with this is that as ecosystems are degraded, the soundscape gets less saturated, so it gets less diverse. And so you can draw conclusions from how the soundscape changes on the health of the ecosystem. And so, in the oceans, obviously you have whales, which are very charismatic, but if you're on a reef, you hear fish as well.
Parrotfish chomping.
Fish chomping and making other sounds. So there's a lot going on there. And then it also sort of introduces the issue of noise pollution. So, oil and gas industries or, military activity, which, is, it's hard to imagine just how devastating that would be if your primary communication channel is sound. And
long distance travel of sound too. I mean, we're not talking about local sound. We're talking about sound that travels hundreds of thousands of miles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's all very interesting. And we're getting a much better sense of the complexity of sound and everything else. I mean, just last week, actually, I put a little sensor in my yard, which identifies birds by their call. Very simple thing, been around for a long time. I just had never had one. And it's really been a way to engage my 7-year-old son on our local biodiversity. So, in 3 days, we have 72 species or something of birds. And it's cool. And there are birds I had no idea that lived here. And there are a lot of birds I'm not a birder, but I actually know tropical birds better than I know the birds in my backyard. But this is, giving me opportunity to learn what those birds are. So it's the bird I see every day, which I didn't know what it was. And now I know what it is and what its call is. So it's pretty cool.
We need to talk more about it, right? So that and we need to get into the right space to get that story and conversation going. How do we do that? How do you I know that you talk some about the audience being bigger than the bubble of those who obviously care. I mean, I'm struggling with the same thing. Like, how do you get the message to give me some advice? How do we get this message to a larger audience so that more people get it and care and start thinking about it?
Well, I think it's about figuring out how to create the connection. So how do you get someone to care about something, whether it's like a far off community in the rainforest or if it's an individual or a species. And I think it often boils down to individuals. Like when you talk about a herd of gazelle, there's some connection, but not really. But if it's like that individual gazelle and it's gazelle's story, it's much more likely to land with somebody because they will identify with it. And so it is really thinking about, it goes back to story and it goes back to connection and often just connecting with another individual. And so like when I go snorkeling or diving, sometimes there'll be like one fish that for a reason decides to connect with me and will follow me while I'm in the water and just be by my side. And if I go back to the same place the next day, that fish will come back. And so it feels like I've created this connection with this fish. We don't speak the same language. We don't breathe this, we don't get oxygen the same way, but we like have this weird connection. And so if I can connect with a fish, it feels like I should be able to connect with other humans as well. So really thinking about like, what is it that drives people? And I think it's stories they can relate to, ultimately at the end of the day, which will move the most people.
Yeah. I mean, you just suggested that, like, give people both the permission and the inspiration to look for that moment so that it can change them. I mean, I think it can really change people to have just a single moment of connection like that, where you open yourself up to a deeper relationship with a natural species. And that happens with pets, right? That it sort of breaks some of those boundaries of raising the level accepted of sentience of a non-human species when you accept your pet into that. But to go beyond that is to give people the spark to have them have those moments so that they want more. Because it's like addictive, right? Like once you have a moment like that, you're just seeking more of them and open to more of them.
Yeah, I wrote a piece recently. It was based on something that one of my board members recounted to me, but it was about this destruction of this reef off Singapore. And, people are, oh, destruction of reef sounds bad, but she specifically was there for this like clownfish family. And it was like very moving.
I read it. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like that was an example of, focusing on just like the individual to tell this story, this bigger story.
Yeah. Well, we'll be sure to share that in the show notes. So thank you for your generosity of time and passion and story. Where are you going from here? Like, give us a kind of a wrap up. What's coming to mind? Like, what's the inspiring advice of the moment, and where are you headed? What's in for you and for Mongabay and for us?
Well, Mongabay has a lot in the works. So I think that a year from now, Mongabay is going to be much better than it is now. So we're expanding new geographies, new languages. We have some very cool new projects to help reach more people, but we need to do more. So I'm glad where we are where we are now, but there's so much more that needs to be done. So yeah, I would say that I think, for me personally, I'm trying to focus on more finding those small stories, solution stories, optimism to give people a sense of agency. Cause I think, I've been told Mongabay is the most depressing side of the internet. I mean, I was told this like, 15 years ago. And I made a conscious effort to try to do more solutions journalism because it's true. I mean, there's so many bad stories out there or sad stories out there. So really trying to find those examples of hope, not ignoring the bad things, but also, it's yes and, so bringing in those positive stories. So I think, looking for those little victories, that can ripple outward and have this help build momentum for greater systemic change. Things are moving in a good direction. It's been interesting. So as I've started writing a lot more, I feel like time has slowed down, which is not something that's happened for me before. Like I have 2 little kids and people always talk about how fast time flies. And it felt like that had been the case for me. Once I really scaled up the writing, I don't know, it's just like created this level of texture and depth to things. And, so I'm just able to appreciate more moments for whatever reason. So I'm really appreciating that right now. So I don't know where that's going to take me exactly, but,
There was an influence in something you wrote. You said that you're slowing down your writing and the reflections had passed over to his stories with your son, and that you were watching him become connected in a way that just lit you up. So, I think that this whole connection with youth and children and family and community is incredibly important to the work we're doing. And last words of wisdom, and then I can say thank you.
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. This has been a great conversation. Just thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. It's been, again, a treat for me to connect with you after all these years of you being a mentor of sorts. So thank you. I can see the resilience lesson so clearly in Rhett's stories. Resilience comes from shifting from small moments of wonder to embracing the larger system of how all is connected. Small sparks of awe, whether it's a frog in a creek or an orangutan's gaze, become more powerful when they link into something larger. That's the tool we can carry with us. Resilience is built when our moments of wonder join a bigger web of meaning. What began as small moments of childhood fascination for Rhett turned into systems thinking, and eventually into his founding and building Mongabay, a whole global network of stories that connect us back to the living world, so we feel compassion and responsibility and love. His story shows how sparks endure when they're shared, when they become part of a network instead of staying isolated. The Gabon community that stopped a logging concession showed us what happens when guardianship is honored. Resilience grows from protecting the systems that sustain life. Yet too often, the opposite choice is being made. This slide into extraction didn't begin yesterday. Centuries ago, European explorers sought spices, sugar, and timber, turning rainforests into commodities for distant markets. That same pattern, seeing these ecosystems as resources to be stripped rather than systems to live within, has carried forward into today. One of the clearest examples is palm oil. It's now a leading cause of rainforest destruction in places like Borneo and Sumatra, where the drive for plantations has pushed species such as orangutans, tigers, and hornbills to the edge of extinction. And palm oil is everywhere, in packaged food, cosmetics, soap, even biofuels. Most of us use it daily without realizing it. The result is the same cycle Rhett described: ecosystems fractured, species lost, communities displaced. This is why systems thinking matters. The rainforest teaches that nothing exists in isolation. Every leaf, every ant, every monkey is part of a larger balance. And yet humans are the only species that seem to have a choice. And too often, we choose to take more than we need, to see the rainforest and the rest of the natural world as if it exists only for us. To change course, we need to relearn what rainforest communities have long practiced, taking only what is needed, giving back, and protecting the balance so it endures. The stakes could not be higher. Rainforests cover only about 6% of Earth's land surface, yet they hold more than half of all known species and countless more that science has yet to discover. Every expedition still uncovers frogs, insects, even trees no one has documented before. These forests help regulate rainfall across entire continents, stabilize global climate, and generate about 20% of the world's oxygen. They store a vast amount of carbon, buffering our planet against climate extremes. They are also where so much of what we depend on originates. Foods like bananas, coffee, chocolate, and spices, medicines from quinine to compounds being tested for cancer, and cultural traditions and wisdom that stretch back thousands of years. And yet, in just the past few decades, our choices have cost us vast stretches of rainforest. Logging, mining, agriculture, and roads have cleared millions of acres, fragmenting habitats and releasing carbon once safely stored in trees and soil. Species have vanished before we even knew they existed. Communities who lived in balance with the forest for generations have been pushed aside. That balance that took millions of years to form, it can be undone in a matter of years. That truth is sobering, and it also means our choices hold enormous power. The same way destruction spreads, so does protection. Each acre preserved, each restoration project, each shift towards sustainable farming or fair trade products can ripple outward. Resilience is built when small sparks of action join larger systems of care. Every small decision matters, from the coffee you buy, to the paper you use, to the voices you amplify. We are the only species with the ability and the responsibility to decide whether rainforests continue to shrink or whether they recover and endure. So here's something you can do to honor this lesson. Learn more about rainforests and natural systems through Mongabay and share stories that inspire action. Support organizations protecting rainforests, from indigenous guardians to global conservation groups. And make daily choices that keep balance in mind. Coffee, chocolate, vanilla, bananas, these everyday rainforest gifts can either sustain systems or strip them, depending on how they're grown. Each choice ripples outward, just like one seed carried by a monkey grown into a new tree. And here's something else you can do right now. Hit pause and share this episode with someone you care about. Someone who could use a reminder that connection makes us stronger. That simple act, like that monkey scattering seeds, may be one of the most resilience-building things you do today. And if you'd like to go further, I've recorded short videos with resilience practices you can use to build this resilience tool. You'll find mindfulness exercises like listening for layers of sound in your environment, the way scientists record a rainforest soundscape, to train your brain to notice more and stress less. There are journaling prompts to help you reflect on the small sparks in your life and how they connect to something larger. You'll also see connection practices, like sharing your spark with someone else so it ripples outward, multiplying meaning. Other videos guide you in choosing a seed of the day, one small intentional act that grows into something bigger, or tracing the system behind an everyday object, like coffee or fruit, to expand awareness and gratitude. And there's even a shared pause practice you can use with friends, family, or colleagues, where each person names one spark of wonder, shifting the whole group's energy towards balance. These are just the beginning. I'll be adding more practices each week, so together we're building a whole library of ways to live with more awe, connection, and resilience. You'll find them on our YouTube channel and linked in the show notes. And finally, I hope you'll help Resilience Gone Wild grow the way a rainforest grows, through connection. Follow the show, leave a review, subscribe to the newsletter, and share it widely so more people can join us in this living network. Like Rhett's journey, I am continuing to build an ecosystem of awe, connection, care, and resilience. Until next time, stay wild.